Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to ACFO Wednesday webinars. As usual, Danny Richard here, ACFO president. Always happy to be with you guys. You know, these webinars is our chance to interact with you, and I love it. Each time I look forward to it. On today's topic, we're talking collective bargaining, the process, and we have our guest is Scott Chamberlain. Let's go over to Scott and say hi, Scott. Good morning, Scott.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Danny. I'm looking forward to talking about collective bargaining and all of our secrets.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Scott. So we'll get to that in just a bit. And again, the process, you're probably familiar here. We're going to discuss collective bargaining, but if you have questions at any point in time, we use Slido as we always do. And I've designed this nice little chart for you guys. I hope you appreciate the arts and craft that I'm doing here. So you go on slido.com, you will see the code that's there. It's ACFO-ACAF. And you can actually interact with us, ask any questions that you want to Scott or myself on any topic. I mean, we're talking about collective bargaining, but you can talk about any topic. It's completely anonymous. You can rank the questions. We'll take the most popular questions up on front. So that's Slido. Let's talk about the return to work. Similar topic. We've had some progress on here where for our members, I've mentioned this before and I'll say it again, there is no rush to return to work. It is a gradual return to work. When we do go back to work, it has to be something that you're comfortable with, right? The employer has taken every reasonable precaution, and you need to know what those measures are. So there is a guidebook that the Office of Chief Human Resources Officer has developed, and each and every department is implementing their own guidelines. You should be receiving this shortly, if even maybe you've already received them. I think something you need to be aware of is there are certain departments, I'm going to go with Public Services Procurement Canada, PSPC. They've actually went above and beyond here. So one of the issues we're facing as ACFO members is, although we're working from home, there's a need of more equipment, right? You might need to have a more comfortable chair, an office, dual monitors, printers, scanners, whatever it is that you need to do your job. Some of our members are not getting those. So PSPC was very proactive. They're actually offering every single employee a $500 allowance. So this is an allowance that anyone can use to go and purchase office equipment. So for example, if you need a chair, you ask your boss, they say, hey, I'd like to buy this chair. It's $400. Your boss says yes. You buy the chair and you send them the invoice and they'll refund you. So this is $500. Now we've seen this with certain departments, but not to this extent, right? Some are 100 or 200. So 500 is good. So you should ask your managers, regardless of which department you're with, ACFO is asking all departments to take a similar path that PSPC has taken, which is to offer every single employee a $500 credit, if you will, to allow them to get more comfortable at the office, at their home office. Now, this allowance is non-taxable, obviously, because it's for your work, it's office equipment, but it's also non-refundable. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So of course, you're going to get the $500 back if you spend it, if your manager approves it. But say you want to have a chair that's $700 and you were to say, hey, I'm going to buy this for $700. You give me a credit of $5 and the $200 will be out of pocket. I'm good with that. You have to be aware that this asset does not belong to you. It is still a government property. It's at your house. But say, for example, you change departments and your boss says, well, we're going to have that chair back. You're not going to get your $200 back. So you got to be aware, even though you might be allowed to spend more money if you get a credit, well, if the asset is more than $500, you're not going to get the credit back. So just be aware of that, because I wouldn't want you guys to be in a position that you're out of pocket saying, wait a second, after 3 weeks, I had to take a deployment somewhere else and I don't get my chair. I mean, I paid for it. It should be my chair. So it's good news they're giving $500, but you got to be careful, and it still requires manager approval. So if any of you are requesting for equipment, it's not working well, or you're saying, well, we're not going to do like PSPC and offer you credits, that's okay. That's within the employer's rights, but you might have an impact on your productivity. I can just think of, for me, dual monitors makes a big difference. And we're lucky enough at ACFO that we provide our staff with that, but maybe it's not the case for you. Or maybe your department is, but your manager is not being as lenient. If it's not working well, feel free to contact us. We're always happy to help. All right, before we get to collective bargaining, because I really want to take your questions on this one, I want to talk a bit about our professional development offering for this year. So you probably saw an email from us last year where we spoke about the Controllership Training Center. We had Joe Bugner, who takes care of our professional development offerings, that did a presentation 2 weeks ago about what was coming. But actually now, as of today, we're going to walk you through our catalog of courses that ACFO is offering our members. And you can see at the screen right now, we're actually going to go through a deck quickly. So maybe we can do to the next page, please, Joe. We're going to see about ACFO. Let's find that. So there's really two key channels that ACFO uses to train our members. There's the Joint Career Development Program, as you can see there on your left. This is really the $1 million fund that actually we negotiated, well, Scott negotiated when he negotiated about 4 years ago in our collective agreement. So this is really courses we offer to our members that are free, that we'll be relaunching today. We launched it last month. We had to change the offering now to really account for the online version of it. So we're going to be relaunching that today. If you already applied, you're going to have to reapply for it, but it literally takes 5 minutes. Everything you see on your left for the Joint Career Development Program, it is free for our members. It is a lottery system. So you apply, you pick your preferences, and there's great courses in that. There's courses that are worth $3,000. There's language training. There's a variety of courses. We're going to go see them later. And on your right is the Controllership Training Center. So this is a PD institute that ACFO created specifically to train our members on areas that we believe they need to improve. I include myself on this one, the soft skills. It is so important. So Joe, if we go to the next slide, please. Here we're going to tell you what has changed in the Joint Career Development Program. So to your left, this was our original plan, what we submitted back in May that you guys applied for. So basically we had large-scale events such as a spring tune-up, conferences for data analytics. We had classroom courses, and then we had experiential learning that you see to your left here, bottom left, which was an interchange program where you job shadow people. But we had to tweak it because now we can't do face-to-face training because of COVID. We need to social distance, so it's had to tweak our plan. So to your right, here's what's currently available, and an email will be sent out to all of our members this afternoon explaining them the new JCDP. So what it is, the spring tune-up is still happening. The next slide, we'll talk about this one. It's still happening. We're going to have a passes for the CPA Public Sector Conference. This is online as well. We're going to be offering online classes, and the distinction to make here is we will not be providing canned material. It will be a live session that you can interact with the presenters because we don't want to use that human element to it. It's not going to be an online thing that you just click next, you watch a video, you click next. No, you can provide feedback, you can interact with your colleagues that are also taking the course. And there's many courses, you can see them there. There's political, financial cycle, authentic leadership. I'm not going to list them all, but they're all there. But there's also language training. This is new for this year. Language training, you could potentially get up to 25 hours of one-on-one language training. So again, you can apply on this today. It's all free. It's all lottery. We have about, between 500 to 800 people that win these prizes that are ranging from $200 to $3,000. So we encourage all of you to apply. It takes 5 minutes, very easy. Joe, if we can go to the next slide. The spring tune-up I just mentioned, so it's still happening. It's going to occur on October 27th and 28th. The reason we're doing it over 2 days is because it's only going to be in the afternoons. We know that attending a video conference, it's more draining if you were to do 7 hours. So we want to make sure that we keep you guys engaged. We're only doing it in the afternoons. You will qualify for 7 CPD hours that you can claim these hours. And look at the agenda here. These speakers that we have lined up, these are experts in their fields. They know what they're talking about. They're good speakers, but more importantly, the topics are relevant, right? Give me an example here. Kelly McDonald on day one, she doesn't only talk about working across generational divides. She talks about having difficult conversations. It's always awkward if you're doing a PMA assessment, how do I have a difficult conversation when I know the person on the other side might not like what I have to say? Second speaker, Giselle Covery. Working with virtual teams and flexible arrangements. I mean, couldn't that be not more relevant right now? So really, the list goes on, inclusive and diversity, right? There's great speaker, relevant conversation, and it's all free. So anyone that applies for the spring tune-up, you're guaranteed a seat. Normally, we have to cap it at 1,200 because we're in person. But now, as long as you're an ACFO member of the CT group, so this applies to the auditors as well, you can actually apply for the spring tune-up. Everyone will be admitted as long as you're a member. 2-day training, 7 CPD credits. It's awesome. Information is available on our website right now. Joe, if we go to the next slide. We're also going to offer a career fair. So during that week of October 27th, 28th, we're going to be asking departments that are looking to hire our members they're going to have a 30-minute session. So every single department that's looking to hire our members for deployment, they're going to give you their sales pitch, and you can ask them questions anonymously. So for example, my home department is PSPC. PSPC is going to have a 30-minute time slot in which they're going to tell you why you should come work for them. Maybe they're going to mention how telework is a big thing. I mean, everyone's teleworking these days, but PSPC was very generous with telework. They have good equipment, good PD budgets. They're good with language training. So they're going to give you their sales pitch. But if you're not sure, you can ask them questions, right? How are they with supporting the CPA accreditation? Like, you can ask your questions anonymously. And at the end, you go with every department that you want and you submit your resume. So for us, it's really a way to match the job seeker with the hiring manager, because we often get this at ACFO. A manager will call us, hey, do you have any FI2, FI3 that looking for a job? I'm like, sure. That's why we actually created a CV inventory, which is the next slide we're going to see right now. The CV inventory is a database that we keep of ACFO members that could potentially be interested in an offer from another department or even the same department, right? One of the challenges we face is we don't know all the jobs that are out there. There are 5,000 controllers out there. And to see what jobs are available, sometimes we do not know. So if you put your name in our CV inventory, whenever our hiring manager is asking for example, a coster or an auditor, they can ask us and we'll submit that information. Now, you need to be aware that whenever you drop your CV in here, any hiring manager could have access to this, which means it could be your hiring manager, right? So we don't vet any candidates. It is confidential in the sense that we only share it with people that are hiring. We wouldn't share this with the public, but it's an excellent way for you guys to get your name out there if you're looking for other deployments, right? It's not necessarily that you want out because you hate your job. You could be just putting your resume in there saying, you know what, I'm open to offers. So that's the CV inventory. If we move on, we can see now we're talking about the Controllership Training Center. So again, initially we had all these courses that were going to be in person, but we can't do that now. So we revised our plan. So what are we doing? We're having the Controllership Training Symposium, which I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. I'll focus on the online courses right now. So we've spoken with CPA Canada, and they've said their CPD hours are still applicable for this year. There's no going to be a reduction of the hours because there's a lot of online training available. So we're going to be moving our in-person courses to online. Those courses, you have them here: effective communications, political skills and influence, emotional intelligence, workplace conflicts. These are all courses we believe that are relevant to you, and you can have them at a discounted price. It's only $290. The reason why it's cheaper, it's very simple, friends. ACFO, we're not looking for a profit. We're a not-for-profit organization, and we're also doing this to serve our members. You know, most unions, they don't train. They just help their members negotiate a collective agreement. They help with workplace conflicts. The reason why we're investing in your training is because we know your career progression is important to you. And we see day to day what are really the skills that need the improvement to get us to that next level. So we're happy to offer that at $290 for our members. But we're also offering you guys a passport, similar to the CPA passport, where if you pay $900, it'll give you access to 3 courses plus the Controllership Training Symposium. If we go to the next slide, I'll talk about that right now. What is this thing? Controllership Training Symposium. This is another big event ACFO is doing. So we do our spring tune-up in October. In November 24th and 25th, we're going to have another 7 hours of CPD credits. Now, this one is different because it's not free. It's $200 for our members, which is very cheap because, again, we're not looking to make a profit. Look at the lineup of the speakers. Brian Maroney is going to be here. Confirm his attendance. We were looking to have him forward to having him this year. We can't do it in person, so we're moving it online. These speakers are people that are relevant. It's $200. It guarantees you a seat. And the reason we're doing it because there's a need for it. We know that a lot of the events that are supposed to happen this year are not. So we want to make sure that you guys are taking your courses, but they're relevant. So you can apply for this right now. We sent you the email last week, or if you go on our website, you go on professional development, you're going to see Controllership Training Center or the Symposium. All the courses are there. You can register and you can sign up for the Controllership Training Symposium. Make sure you put this in your learning plan. And this is why we're giving you all this PD offering. We know that right now, as you're doing your PMA objectives for the year, you're also doing your learning plan. So you want to make sure you're aware of these courses that are out there. All right, so that's it for the offering we're going to do for this year. If you have more questions on this, obviously you can contact us. We want to put it out there so you guys know. Let's move on to the main topic, which is collective bargaining. I could tell you, friends, I remember when I first got involved with ACFO, it was a late 2009 or 10, and we used to negotiate for 3 or 4 days. And I looked on the website and I saw, hey, how come we didn't achieve a deal? Like, I don't understand what's happening. So I want to throw it over to Scott. And Scott, can you just walk us through what is the process? How does it start from the very beginning up until we get a deal? Can you explain what that process is? Scott, over to you.
Sure, thanks, Danny. First off, I'll dispel probably the most common myth about collective bargaining is that it is it's a table negotiation between two sides that starts and stops. So the process is continuous when it comes to collective bargaining, even though our collective agreement doesn't expire until November 2022. The process is ongoing now, and maybe I'll walk you through the steps that we're taking and take for collective bargaining just quickly, and then talk about some of the strategy we employ at ACFO to make sure collective bargaining is successful. So the first step that ACFO would take in advance of a collective bargaining round, the next being 2022, is to assess what's happened at the other bargaining tables in the federal public service. So that's ongoing. So we have, in addition to myself, the negotiator, we have 2 assistant negotiators, and right now they are reviewing contracts that were signed last round and contracts that will be signed in the coming months to assess what gains have been made and what losses have been absorbed in those other tables, because that's critical information for us to plan and strategize for the next round. So that involves a line-for-line review of each agreement on a constant basis. Sometimes we have a research committee as well that helps with that, made up of members. But that committee is drawn from the collective bargaining committee, which is really the first step in the process that involves members in the collective bargaining process. So we, as you know, do a survey every year, a state of the community survey. We also will do collective bargaining surveys in advance of collective bargaining rounds in order to get members' input from anybody who wants to put input in terms of what priorities are for the group and what ideas members have in terms of improving the terms and conditions of employment. So with the results of that survey, we strike a collective bargaining committee. So that committee is made up of anywhere between 25 to 40 CTs now, and we draw from all levels and all regions. We try and make it demographically accurate in terms of having men, women, racialized members, having a good representation of the entire membership. And then that committee will go through all of the members' ideas that came in the collective bargaining survey and all the input that we've collected in LR when we've been working with members on their files, and decide what are our proposals / demands going to be for this round. So they vet those, and this gets approved by the board, who also, by the way, is who appoints the collective bargaining committee. And then a team, a negotiating team in the past, and now it's going to be 3 negotiating teams, or 4, are struck in order to actually negotiate those demands with the employer. So in the past, many of the FIs will be familiar with us having 1 bargaining team. Well, now that we have 3 subgroups, the 3 CT subgroups, we will have 1 central table and 3 subtables that deal with the specific issues for those subgroups, to make sure that every member is represented by members of their CT subgroup. So once these teams are struck, we do sit down with what everybody thinks is the core of collective bargaining, which is negotiations with the employer. These take place in the past in person. They can take place virtually, and they are right now with the Alliance, as a matter of fact. But we sit down, as much as you would imagine, a team of about 7 or 8 people on each side, actually going through the proposals, explaining them to the other side, and trying to negotiate the best terms and conditions for our members. Now, once in an ideal world, you're able to negotiate at that table what the final agreement's going to look like, and you send it to the members for ratification. What happens if that doesn't happen? If we can negotiate part of the terms and conditions but can't agree on certain things? Well, in that case, there's something called a dispute resolution mechanism, which is either strike or arbitration. And I think you're probably familiar with these processes. ACFO has used both in the past. More often than not, we've used arbitration. And that is a mechanism that's chosen by the members. And what we'll do as an organization in advance of collective bargaining, we'll look at what the strength of our case is. You know, how do we compare to the market, both internally and externally? Do we have good evidence for an increase of a certain amount? And have we reached that? Have we reached that plateau in negotiating at the table? And if we haven't, and we have good evidence, then we want to take it to a third party, and we want that third party to rule on what the final terms of the collective agreement will be. So I'll go back a step. If it's negotiated and agreed to at the table, we send it to the board for approval, and then the members for ratification, a vote. And then the members decide whether they want this collective agreement or not. If we haven't managed to agree to a tentative agreement at the table and we're sending it to arbitration, what ends up happening is a third party who's not a government employee, who is a neutral third party, will make a ruling, and that will be our collective agreement for whatever term is decided in that ruling. And then the next stage of the process is implementation, which could take some time. We need to translate the agreement, get it printed. The employer needs to prepare communications for the departments to explain to them the changes of the collective agreement, and then it's implemented. And in an ideal world, it's done so in about 120 days. Obviously, with Phoenix, it's taken longer. But then the implementation stage of making the changes and paying the pay that's due occurs. And then, so this is a brief overview. There's other steps, but at that point, we have a new collective agreement in place, and we go into the administration stage. And that is, we make sure everybody gets what they're due from the collective agreement, and we administer the agreement. Sometimes there's interpretation questions that come up, and we were talking to Treasury Board about that, revisiting our negotiations and coming to agreement on what the words mean sometimes. And then during that administration, and we're almost coming full circle here, things will get raised where maybe the collective agreement needs other provisions, and we take that into account, and that becomes part of the input for the next round. So I'll give you an example. During the administration of our current collective agreement, we had a little thing called the pandemic. Well, and it exposed the fact that our collective agreement doesn't really have provisions that are specifically tailored to govern a pandemic. Shift work, when an employer can force you to work after hours, wearing PPE provision in the workplace. There's a lot of things that weren't in the collective agreement, aren't in the collective agreement, that we now have to take to the table and negotiate. And I guess the only other thing I'd say about the general process is that from time to time during the administration, if both parties agree, you can reopen the agreement to deal with specific issues. So back to the example of the pandemic, we are talking to the employer now about an MOU that may provide some additional terms and conditions that would be subject to ratification in terms of how to deal with the continuing pandemic. So that's the general process, the sort of the flow chart, and it is a circle. Danny, I don't know if you have any initial questions about that you want me to cover, but the next thing, and probably the more important part is, well, how do we make sure that we do this right? What is our strategy? What is our approach to bargaining? And I can get into that if you prefer at this point.
No, that's great, Scott. You could go move into that one. It's fine. I mean, I forgot to introduce you, Scott. Sorry about this. So for those who don't know Scott, he's actually he has many hats here at ACFO. So He's our general counsel, but also our lead negotiator. He's been with us since about 15 years, actually more than 15 years, 2004. And so he knows the process. That's why I'm happy that not only he's our lead negotiator, but he can share with us his thoughts on that. So yeah, Scott, back over to you to maybe describe what you were saying there.
Okay. And some of these notes that I'm going to go through here are something I prepared for a symposium of negotiators and from both the employer and the union side, talking about, how, it was for people that were new to LR about how to get into bargaining and how the process really works. And so I'm just going to go through. It's not that long. It's bullets, and just talk about some of the things in our toolbox, some of our strategies that have helped us ensure that over the sliding 10-year window that we're always above inflation and always improving and getting additional terms and conditions of employment, to make sure that the collective agreement we sign next is better than the last and better than the one before that. And so for me, the cardinal rule of collective bargaining is to establish and maintain good relationships. And these relationships are with multiple stakeholders. They're with members, they're with the board from ACFO, so they're internal relationships, but they're also with the employer. So the parties that are in the chain of command for collective bargaining, we also deal with on other committees, in other forums like NJC, and both Danny and I are very integrated into those forums and making sure that we're working with these people on on a variety of other initiatives, so they know us and we know them, and that we can build trust with them, so that when it comes to bargaining, we have a leg up. So I'll give you an example of this. So Danny is very engaged as our president in the National Joint Council, and on the employer side of the National Joint Council is many of the people from OCRO that control the process just below the minister in terms of what will get approved and what they'll consider at the bargaining table. And we maintain a very positive and constructive relationship at NJC to ensure that that relationship helps us out. Likewise, we spend a lot of time with our other bargaining agents in the Federal Public Service, making sure that we have good relationships there, because on multiple occasions during bargaining, we're going to meet with them, talk with them, want information what's happening at their table, because bargaining is much more than what's happening at the ACFO table. It's a very complicated dance involving all the bargaining agents at multiple tables, what strategies they're bringing, what they're bringing forward, what they're getting, what they're not getting. We need to know all that information to make sure that we're negotiating properly. So, establishing good relationships is critical. I can say with absolute 100% certainty that we've developed and improved that round for round, year for year since 2004, and we've never been in a better position than we are presently. Secondly, it's something I've already noted. Our negotiations are driven by evidence and information. And during that administration period of the process, we're collecting information and we're collecting evidence. Things you might not even think are related to collective bargaining are professional, making sure that the group is professional, making sure that you're getting training is part of bargaining strategy. We want to make sure that, for example, to maintain the JCPD, that we're using it, that it's working, it's functioning properly, because we're going to go back to the table and look for it to be increased for our new CT members so that we can do even more. But evidence, if we're bringing forward a bargaining demand that we don't have good evidence to back up, if we're before a third-party arbitrator, we're not doing our job. And I would say that all the evidence in the world sometimes won't get the employer to agree with us, but if they know we have arbitration as an option, and they know we've got them on the evidence that we're far below market or something of that nature, then that will help at the table as well. So we do a very fine review and collect evidence so that we know exactly where we are in relation to other groups in the private sector. Another thing about bargaining, everyone's played board games. So you can ask me about the process and what my strategy is, but it's more of a general strategy. You can't tell me how you're going to win any given game. If you're playing a game of Monopoly, for example, you can't tell me how it's going to go as you play the game. It's the same thing with the collective bargaining. We're prepared, and we're experienced, and we're flexible, and that allows us to react as it goes on. I can't think of a single round where it turned out the way that we might have predicted at the beginning, but I know that we can adjust and adjust on the fly. And that's another key thing about collective bargaining. You need to be flexible. You need to be ready to adjust on the fly. You need to be confident in your decision making and not worry about, am I making the right or wrong decision? You need to make decisions and move forward, because 95% of them are reversible in any event. And there's a rule book, but the rules get broken all the time when it comes to collective bargaining, unlike Monopoly. And so you need to be flexible, and you could probably yourselves look at examples from other bargaining agents and in other areas where someone negotiating isn't flexible, digs in on a position, paints themselves into a corner, and finds themselves without a win and without a deal years after someone that's being flexible. And that's important. That's one of the key things to bargaining successfully. Probably about halfway through here, and then we'll go to questions. Politics matter in collective bargaining. In addition to our counterparts on the at OCRO, we're also involved with Canada Labour Congress and other larger labour councils because they have influence in politics. We meet with MPs. We go to advocacy days. It's very helpful to know the staff of these MPs, particularly for the President of the Treasury Board. You know, we've had rounds where we've known the right-hand person to the President of the Treasury Board, and if we don't like the way the table's going, we call them up and we tell them they need to deal with this, and so they hear it from us and they hear it from above sometimes, and that's very effective. So we need to maintain constantly an advocacy that a level of advocacy that we know who the players are and who the up-and-coming players are and who can influence them, and we use those contacts. Danny, maybe you can just add in there in terms of CLC and how we used that last round and how you used it as a politician yourself.
Yeah, it is so important. Their first point was about relationships, right? Your relationships apply to any facets of your life, professional, personal. You cannot afford to have enemies. I'm not saying you should agree with everyone, but sometimes when people know you're connected, sometimes oh, you're more important than I thought you were. I think when I was high school, right? I was lucky enough, I knew people on the football team. And all of a sudden, even though I didn't play football myself, I got that protection of bigger players that could say, oh, same thing for us. So the Canadian Labour Congress, we're affiliates of them. That makes us a bigger player in a bigger pond. And all of a sudden now people see our names here and there. ACFO is involved in many aspects. So for us, having partners on many levels helps us create solutions and wins for everyone. If you refer someone to someone else that has a solution, even though the only thing you did was a referral, in their mind, ACFO is an ally. That's what you want. Everyone needs to see ACFO as problem solvers, allies, professional, positive attitudes. We're never the people that are like, no, we can't do this. We're like, okay, what are your cards? What are our cards? Let's find a way to make this happen. So it's so important, Scott.
Thanks, Danny. The next thing I would say is that it is a team. It is a team sport, collective bargaining. It is not just one player that's making this progress for ACFO and our members. And we're very careful to make sure we're training, that we're gaining experience, that we're developing people to fill in for myself or board members when they move on, and that we identify our gaps, and if we need to hire somebody from the outside to help with that, with a pay study or something of that nature, that we do that. And so this is not, I may be your lead negotiator, but there's dozens and dozens of people that are, dozens of people that are directly involved with the very direct stuff, and dozens and dozens of people that are involved with the entire process. So that's important. It's not, because bargaining used to be sort of a one-person show. The negotiator did all the talking, at the table. We were very careful about who we put there, and it's more than one person that makes these deals happen. You need to be patient. Key. You need to be patient with collective bargaining. Sometimes it involves being patient during a round. Sometimes it involves being patient round to round. So sometimes we may want something very badly, like a professional development training fund, and it took 3 rounds to achieve that goal. And it may take 3 rounds to achieve, a real strong pandemic plan that we think is exactly what we wanted. Don't be afraid to take baby steps. Get a provision that allows the manager to have the discretion to give you something, and then try and make it mandatory at the employee's desire later on in a collective agreement. If you're not being patient, you can't be. You need to get out of this game, because sometimes things take months that should take days, and sometimes you need to plan rounds ahead. Our job is really, my job is really to find out what the leverage points are. And so, as well as putting our own demands together, we need to really look at what the employer is asking for and find where we can give sometimes as well. Sometimes they're asking for something that really doesn't impact the CT group. Sometimes you're looking for an example that they can use at another table. And while we're not throwing other bargaining units under the bus, at the same time, we need leverage points. And that could be a great pay study. That could also be something that we can give that they're looking for at the collective bargaining table. And so we need to be cognizant of that. Just a few more points. You do have to change gears now and again. And by that, I mean, it's a poker term. You can't play one way every round to round. And so, we have a reputation for being, we're always professional, for, picking arbitration, and being very reasonable. But from time to time, we're going to have to choose strike as an option, for example. And that may not be this time coming, but we did in 2006, for example, and we were successful that round because of it. And maybe we chose it that round because we didn't have the greatest external pay study, because we had gotten good increases the contract before. But don't be afraid to change gears. We'll do that personality-wise at the table sometimes, and the way we're relating to people. But as an organization too, there'll be times when we take a different tact, and that's important to maintain. Stuff happens, and sometimes you can't predict everything. I'm sure the bargaining agents who did not take the 8% increase and the Phoenix deal on this past round regretted it when the pandemic hit. Some of them are back at the bargaining table this week, and they may get that pattern deal, but they've had to wait a lot longer for it. And you can never predict anything. You have to sort of plan for elections and that sort of thing, but stuff will happen and you have to adjust, and it's just important to keep in mind. I think that's all I really need to say about the strategy. Danny, there's a lot of questions we can answer some of those.
Yeah, we're going to go with the questions again. If you have questions right now, they're on Slido. We see them on the screen. I just want to add a couple of things. Scott, we could do a whole day on negotiation. To me, the best way to understand the process is volunteer. I did this once. It was amazing. It was completely not what I thought it was. And by getting involved, you're making a difference. Because ACFO is a union, right? Of course, we're there to represent you when you have workplace issues. Yes, but one of the things that most important by far for the majority of our members is that collective bargaining, that agreement that we have. So Scott mentioned, we take an input. We receive hundreds and hundreds of requests, and we put them in one succinct document, and then we have to make decisions. Okay, which one are we bringing forward? We cannot come to the table with 1,000 demands. It's just not efficient. It wouldn't make any sense. The employer would not take us seriously. So we need to make decisions. Now, the top 3 are always the same of the demands we get from our members. The number 1 is people want higher wages. That's always number 1 and by far. The second is always more leave, like more flexible leave. Now, the third one is either professional development or telework and compressed. They can waver between the two, but by far the first one is wage. So of course, when Scott's negotiating our contract, he knows that the top front and center is wages, but everyone wants higher wages. So it's not because you put something forward that you're going to get it. Of course, we're going evidence-based, but even if we have an ironclad evidence-based, that doesn't mean the employer is going to give it to us. So we have to pull on those levers, like Scott was saying, to find out where is their flexibility. We don't want to leave any money on that table, but we need to actually do the best that we can for our members. So when we do sign a deal, always look at the details. There's something that you'll hear in the media, other unions got this and we got that. Read all the fine print, because as Scott can tell you, sometimes we have to be clever in how we do things, because the employer has to speak the political talk, right? So they want to make sure everyone got the same deal, but we very rarely get the same deal. There's always little hidden gems here and there, and if you read through the details, that's where you can see. All right, let's go to the question. So again, if you have questions for Scott, you go to slido.com, you enter ACFO-ACAF. We've got some questions right now, Scott, and I'll launch over. So the first one is, will ACFO push the employer to offer more holidays in the future, such as Saint Jean-Baptiste, Family Day, the day after? And Scott, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that, because we already have that demand.
Yeah, sure. Each of those suggestions we've we've sought at the table. We've always asked for more statutory holidays in every round that I've been involved since 2004. I'll be straight with you. One of the issues with this is evidence. If we compare what our group has for statutory holidays to external, private sector and internal, we match internal and we exceed what people on the outside have. So going to an arbitrator, they're never going to award this to us. An arbitrator at this point will not award us additional statutory holidays. However, I think we're getting closer on the backs of a demand to recognize one additional day for a variety of these reasons, including religious holidays as well, which is one of them not mentioned in there. That's a hard, it's a hard one to get. We keep trying. So we're going to continue to do our best. We know that the Liberal government was close to giving an additional statutory holiday, Indigenous Peoples Day. And so we may be getting one in any event closer to when the next election gets called.
Scott, before I go to the next question, you mentioned the Liberal government. What impact, how important does the current government in power have an impact in the negotiations?
Well, it can be night and day when it comes to negotiations. It doesn't have as big an impact when it comes to an arbitration if we can't get an agreement at the table. But if you look at the history of our bargaining, generally when there's been a Liberal government, we've been able to negotiate an agreement. And when there's been a Conservative government, we've had to go to arbitration and get a ruling. It's not always the case, but that's generally what's occurred. Just generally, the more left of center the government is, the more likely we are to get a negotiated agreement. And the more fiscally conservative, austerity focused the government is, the less likely that is. It's one of the most important considerations in terms of the timing of bargaining.
Thanks, Scott. Next question we have here from Eric. Could our union potentially look into negotiating a 4-day work week, similar to what is happening in New Zealand? What challenges would there be to doing this?
Sure. I think it's a matter of time before the 4-day work week is in place. Just generally, I think this is something that we're trending towards. I think the immediate step before that will be increased telework, remote work, and flexible hours. I think an employer is going to be more willing to go to a 4-day work week if there's a practice in place where employees put in their hours in a flexible way, put more hours in one day than the other. And I think this is a bit of a state, a petri dish right now with the pandemic of proving to the employer that people can get their work done and not be complying to a strict, 7.5 hours a day, this hour to this hour type schedule. So will there be a 4-day work week? If I had to predict, I'd say yes, just like there was no parental leave at one point and now there is. But I think there's going to be intermediate steps before we get there. I mean, even right now we have flexible hours of work that allow compressed days. That's an intermediate step towards a 4-day work week. I mean, you could get a 4-day work week now with the flexible hours of work with the right manager. It's a good point, Scott. I think one of the good things about COVID, COVID was a disaster, but it really, for the federal government, fast tracks us 10 years ahead in terms of understanding flexible work arrangements.
Some of our members couldn't get telework, and now they're teleworking 5 days a week. So that instant switch proved the theory of, hey, it works. So I could totally see this happening where, you do your hours when you want to, as long as the work gets done. And I'll tell you at ACFO, that's how we do things. As long as our members are taken care of, I don't care where you're working from, what time, as long as our members are being served, that's all that matters to us. Scott, this next question is interesting because I know I had asked this originally as well, and I didn't understand the process. But the question is, why there was no strike for any union regarding the Phoenix fiasco, as its negative impacts on our members, as it totally doesn't respect the collective agreement. So why didn't we go on strike, Scott?
Well, it's conflating two separate processes, actually. I mean, in order to strike and not be disciplined for refusing to go to work, which would normally be insubordination, you have to be in a legal position to strike. So you have to be collectively bargaining, you have to have hit impasse, you have to have gone to a public interest commission, which is kind of like a mediation, and you have to have had a strike vote. So you can't decide, you can wildcat strike, which is just, we're all going to refuse to work, but that would mean hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines, and every member being disciplined who didn't show up to work because it's illegal. That's basically the state of legislation. If some bargaining agents have kind of gotten to that point where they chose strike going into collective bargaining, largely because of Phoenix, and have yet to have a collective agreement, have gone to a PIC. I'm talking about the Alliance at this point, and actually got sent back initially because they hadn't bargained enough, according to the board, and then went back again, and then we're in a legal position to strike, and the pandemic hit, and now we're back to the bargaining table. I mean, striking for one issue, again, you have to look at your evidence and your positioning and your bargaining, if that one issue is worth striking over, and again, takes two to agree. A strike doesn't get broken by a third party. A strike gets broken by the government and the union. And so instead, we negotiated an MOU that provided days off, provides for a grievance process that's almost complete, that will allow members to apply for more damages. I guess the kind of thing that's unique about Phoenix too is no one on the other side was saying that they didn't screw it up and that they weren't going to fix it. And so it was just a matter of they had screwed up so badly that it's going to take years to fix it. And so I guess that's the answer to the question, Danny.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because we just, like you just said, Scott, we couldn't strike. There's only certain circumstances in which you can strike, and we couldn't. And members have told us then, why didn't you sue the government, right? And we looked into it, and we realized that it wasn't an option that was available to us because we would have lost the cause. When we're dealing with the employer, we're bound by certain conditions. And one of them is when you have a dispute, you file a complaint, which we did. We filed a complaint on behalf of all of our members, and every single union did this. But still would have taken years to actually get a resolution. There was no short-term solution to Phoenix. And that's why, and Scott was on this committee actually, that we are able to negotiate damages for the past 4 years, right? We got 5 vacation days, a one-time allotment, and there's also damage and interest for the members that have more serious circumstances. There's more potential damages available, but Phoenix will continue for a couple of more years, so we're going to have to start negotiating more damages further down the road. But when it comes to Phoenix, we did everything that we could that was under our mechanisms of doing so. It's not for a lack of trying or investigation, or it really did everything we could. It just wasn't as simple as I thought it was, because when we're dealing with the lawyers, it's like, well, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. So I'm happy that the employer acknowledged that Phoenix was not working well. They gave us the 5 days, and now we're going to continue negotiating damage moving forward. Scott, I'll take this question. Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Just on the question of suing, for this and other issues as well, when you're a unionized worker, you don't have the right to go to sue in civil court. The grievance process displaces that right. It was a very quick opinion from me when we looked at that early on, and actually it's been tested. So a law firm in Quebec tried to do a class action on behalf of public servants, some of them unionized, and it's been denied. Supreme Court has ruled again. So this is an easy answer. If you're thinking about why can't we sue, almost always the answer is because it's not legally provided for. You have to grieve. Sorry, Danny.
No, thank you. That's a good detail. I'll just take this one regarding spring tune-up. So the question was, I already signed up for the spring tune-up. Do I have to sign up again? The answer is no. Any registration to the spring tune-up will be automatically transferred to the new spring tune-up October 27th, 28th. And if you don't want to go, then you can just cancel. That's fine, but the transfer happens. But if any other event for JCDP, or if you had signed up for the spring tune-up plus, which is now the Controllership Symposium event, you will need to re-register for that one. Scott, so if you're already preparing the next round, do you expect wage reduction because of the current COVID spending?
So COVID or not, we always expect that there's going to be periods of austerity, which involve legislated wage freezes or caps. We've seen that before in the past, since 2004. We've seen governments put a cap on increases. So I would expect, I would be foolish to say to you that we're not ever going to see austerity again, and we're not ever going to see the government use the Workforce Adjustment Directive, which will involve reducing the number of employees in the federal public service. But there's never been an example of that I can think of wages being reduced at collective bargaining, and I think that's not something we're going to see. We're going to see a government at some point, most likely a conservative government based on past history, or potentially a liberal government, put in a wage freeze at some juncture, or look at reductions in the complement of public service. The good news on that is that if it's workforce adjustments based on the last round of workforce adjustments, I mean, the FI and CT and the auditor groups, I believe, were not as highly impacted as other groups, and I don't expect they will be in the next round either. But yeah, we expect there's always calls for public servants to pay the price tag for benefits that everybody enjoyed, and so that's something we constantly need to fight against. And on that case, if they try and freeze wages or reduce wages, we'll again go to the Supreme Court and say they're trying to fetter our freedom of association, the right to collectively bargain. And unions have been winning those cases in provinces and across the country, and we're making gains there as well.
Thanks, Scott. I'll answer this one on how people can get involved with collective bargaining, and I'll let you answer the one about family related. So the question is, how can ACFO members be part of the collective bargaining process aside from voting? And I like this question. I mean, voting is by far the most important. You've got to vote, right? ACFO brings a collective agreement to your attention, and we want you to vote. This is your decision. We don't vote yay or nay. You guys, everyone collectively does. But there's different ways you can get involved. The first one is, before each round of negotiation begins, as Scott was mentioning, we ask for your input. We ask you, hey, look at your current collective agreement and what is it you'd like us to improve on your behalf to bring proposals forward. So you submit your requests, and this happens many months before we start bargaining because you want to go through all those requests. That's the first one. So submit proposals. What do you want to see improved on? The second one is you can actually get involved in a collective bargaining committee. These are the people, 50 or 60 people, that will go through all those proposals and say, what are we narrowing it down to? Maybe 20 or 40, but we can't go 1,000. So you get to go see every single proposal. Most of the legwork is done by our staff, but you make decisions on behalf of all the members, which ones will make the final cut to the table. The other way to get involved is the collective bargaining team. So this is the actual team that will negotiate with the employer. So when we negotiate at the table, there's about 10 people on our side, which is mostly members. And then the employer side is mostly executives from various departments. And then we go through the motions, we look at the proposals. So you can be part of that team. Another way to get involved is through a research committee. So often ACFO needs to collect data. So we'll ask, for example, we need to see how many non-advertised competitions were there in 2018. So some of our members have access to the PSC, and they can actually dig the information from us. So we have the data. So there's many ways to get involved. And I will tell you, for me, it was such an eye-opening event. You guys should definitely get involved, at least at the collective bargaining committee. So you really get a good feel for, wow, I had no idea that we bring so many things to the table, because we bring to the table, but that doesn't mean that we get them. Scott, I'll throw it over to you for the family related, but did you want to add anything else on how to get involved with the collective bargaining process?
No, just volunteer, or fill out the survey, volunteer. Even if we've already started, we've had members join the research committee afterwards. If you want to get involved with collective bargaining, call me up and we'll see what we have available at any given time, and or the chair of the collective bargaining committee. There's lots of opportunities. I can't think of anyone we've turned away who wanted to be involved with collective bargaining. Why does ACFO provide family-related leave when it has members that are eligible for it? We have a whole host of leave provisions in the collective agreement, many of which only specifically apply to certain members. Give an example, court leave is probably something that's rarely used by all members. We have provisions that only apply to members in certain departments, an allowance for some of our members at CSC that are at greater risk. Likewise, family-related leave, that we've tried to increase it so that there's some use of it, even if you don't have family members, like going to your financial advisor, going to your legal advisor. But don't mistake, another common assumption is that the employers come to us and said, here, we have 3 days of leave. You want to call it family leave or you want to call it vacation? It's not like that. This is an example of something that was negotiated by another bargaining agent. It was sort of a take it or leave it. You can take the family leave, or we can leave it on the table and insist on vacation, which they're not going to give us, because then that causes a precedent that they have to face at other tables. So we've gone to the employer and talked about entirely different systems of leave, where maybe it's just a set pot, and we're not going to call it family leave and vacation and sick leave. There's going to be a set amount, and you're just going to choose what you want. But I can tell you, the starting point for that conversation from the employer is, okay, well now, if all these forms of leave add up to 35 days, we'll give you that pot, but you'll have 15 days. I mean, they cost everything out. And so we're doing the best for all of our members. There are certainly provisions that don't benefit every member, but that's every collective agreement. There's nothing inappropriate about that. We've got members that are sick during their career that need short-term disability, and we're looking at negotiating that. And other members won't have to use it. But we're also looking at a member as during the life cycle of their career as well. Certain provisions are going to be more useful to a member early on than later on, and vice versa. Compassionate care leave being an example. And also, we negotiate what our members ask us to negotiate. And so family leave is something that is very popular in the membership in terms of asking for increases to it and looking for it initially.
Thank you, Scott. We've got 2 questions on strike here. The first one is PSAC still going to strike? If so, will there be virtual pickets line, and do we have to cross them? And then maybe throw in there, could we get a better deal if we went on strike?
Well, as of today, the Public Service Alliance of Canada is negotiating. So I think it started Tuesday and they're negotiating into next week. Are they close to a deal? That's my information. Will it look a lot like the deal the rest of us got? That's my information. That's not a guarantee. Do I think they're going to go on strike? Potentially. I think if they don't get a deal this week or next, they'll move back to that. But I don't think it's an ideal time to be striking in terms of the, striking's about public leverage. And I think you'd have to answer your question on your own to say how popular is striking going to be during a pandemic. I think not. The second part of the second question there was, can we get a better deal if we strike? Sometimes is the answer to that question. So if I see a round coming up where we don't have good evidence for a pay increase, let's say our pay is above the internal comparators, that's the other groups in the public service that are similar to the CTs, maybe we got a pay equity settlement that puts our wages above external when you take in all the benefits and pensions and such. If I don't think we have good evidence, or we think there's a government that's particularly susceptible to a strike because of public opinion, then there may be a moment where a strike makes sense, like we had in 2006. So I'm certainly not adverse to strikes. I do think for this professional group, arbitration is almost always going to be a better route than strike. Yeah,
thanks, Scott. We'll just take one more question here on pay equity, but I just want to add to the strike. You have to keep in mind when you go on strike, to me, is the very last recourse. It is significant action, and you have to remember you're not paid. Yeah, ACFO has a $5 million strike fund. $5 million is a lot of money, but if you divide that by 5,000 members, I mean, we wouldn't put everyone on strike, but 5,000 members, 52 weeks, you're looking at what? $20 a week? It's not going to be a lot of money. So, and then you got to mic up for all those lost wages. So every day that you're on strike, that's money not being paid, and you got to gab that money back in the deal that you signed. So we're very strategic in our approach. I would rather do a work to rule that you guys are still paid versus a strike. So we got to be careful when we talk about strike, because it's really the last resort that we want to go to. One last question, Scott, because it's getting close to 1 o'clock here. Given that the shift of Trudeau's focus from feminism to racism, will ACFO's pay equity discrimination claim not being a priority for the current government?
Actually, I don't think it'll be a factor. We already have a memorandum of agreement in place for an entire process. I was actually on a phone call this morning with my counterparts in pay equity. We'll be signing the MOA, paying for the independent study. It's already a process that's been built and they've agreed to because of that priority. And I don't see that having an impact on the current pay equity process, which has been slowed down by COVID, but we've now gotten to the point where we can restart it.
Great, thank you, Scott. Yeah, I'm looking forward for the pay equity. It's been going on for years now, and there was always have hiccups. We really got to get our ducks all lined up, so it's moving forward. One day we'll have a resolution on that one. Who knows what it will be? But it's a long-term investment, that's for sure. So everyone, it's 1 o'clock. I want to thank our guest, Scott Chamberlain. Did a great job again. If you have any questions at any point in time regarding the collective bargaining process, if you think our strategy makes no sense, always contact us. There are certain things, certain strategies that we use that we unfortunately cannot post on our website because it's showing all of our cards, right? There's certain things we need to change. So if ever you want to get more about it, get involved with the collective bargaining process. It is fascinating to see behind those curtains to see how it works. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Next week is going to be Wednesday webinars. We're taking off because of it's a July 1st holiday. So we'll see you back in July with more webinars. Until then, stay safe, everyone. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye now.